Okay, well, let's just start by talking about what's coming in the future and what's got you excited about Captain Canuck currently.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead, tell us about that.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Uh, well, last year was kind of a celebratory, momentous year in the sense that 50 years have gone by very, very quickly. It was also my wife and my 50th wedding anniversary. We were married in 1975. So yeah, last year, 2025 was kind of a milestone for us for sure. And I did more appearances at comic conventions than I have in the last few years. So was a bit all over the place, and it was a bit exhausting, but it was a good year in a lot of respects. So. And what's coming up is the fun things that are coming up, and things that I'm looking forward to as well is that there is going to be a Captain Canuck Archie series coming this summer. Also, I did a series. I did Captain Canuck Reborn between 93 and 96, and that's going to be collected into a trade paperback. I think it's going to be released before the end of this year. So I have no I know about that it's going to be summer for Archie Captain Canuck, but I don't know when the Reborn collection is going to be released. Here in British Columbia, Vancouver Transit is going to be issuing Captain Canuck transit cards. So people who ride public transit in Vancouver will be able to hold I guess, keep and collect a Captain Canuck transit card. Um, Transit is also using Captain Canuck for some educational, um, I don't know, graphics that they're going to be putting inside their buses and their trains and etc. too. So, and I've just seen the roughs for those, so that's going to be a lot of fun too.
Yeah,
So,
there's no keeping the old captain down, eh?
no.
Um, so the whole reason I reached out to you to discuss with you is we Comics Odyssey is a podcast all about comic books. What we do is we look at comics that are of interest to us, and we flip through them with the camera pointing towards the comic and just commentate on what we see. Excuse me. I think we both got the same frog in the throat.
Yeah.
And so we did a Captain Canuck, which is we did the whole original run, just looking through it, flipping through it, and um, in accepts issue 14 and 15, which I don't have in my collection. And we found it quite fascinating, especially as an artifact of Canadian history, but also an inspirational story of indie comics publishing. And I wanted to ask you about the challenges of publishing an independent comic in the 1970s through the 80s, because now we have all these tools at our disposal as indie comics makers. We have the internet, and we have like this sort of technology that allows us to get the word out about our comic. But you had to raise funds, you had to get sponsors. There was a lot of behind the scenes work that went into putting this series together. So I'd like to hear about those challenges and how you overcame them.
Well, okay, so it was definitely different back then in 1975. I I really didn't get serious about publishing Captain Canuck until 1973. I met Ron Leishman in 1971, and it was his idea that there should be a Canadian comic book series. And we talked about it. We didn't, Captain Canuck or Captain Canada is what we vacillated between those two names. Captain Canuck won out, mainly because there was already three Captain Canadas out there. And I still get asked to this day, how come he isn't called Captain Canada? Well, because there was already three of them, and and two of them were really goofy. You know what I mean? One was a guy with moose horns. So um, what the big challenge back then was distribution. You got to remember that this was before I believe there was a total of four comic books shops in Canada
Wow.
by 1975.
Four. One, two, three,
Four.
four. Wow.
There was one in Winnipeg, one in Kitchener, one in Toronto, and I believe there was one in Vancouver. So, from the research that I've done, that's what. So that wasn't happening yet. The direct market was still, in a germ stage kind of thing. Basically, the distribution system was all mass market newsstand distribution. People bought their comic books in drugstores, convenience stores, even grocery stores, and the distribution was handled by magazine distributors. There were 35 regional wholesalers in Canada, and then there were national wholesalers that supplied the regionals. And so I was able to make a deal with a national, in 73. I started talking to them actually about distribution. And the deal, everything was based on sales. So you only got paid for the copies that actually sold, and everything that didn't sell was returned and destroyed basically, or in most cases. So that was, and of course I realized it was going to be a challenge to survive economically. And so I spent more time than I should have trying to get advertising, to sell advertising space. And I did sell some, but it definitely wasn't enough to make a real difference in our income. But I got a tremendous amount of support from media in Canada. I did not know it at the time, but Captain Canuck was the only or the first independently published full color comic book with mass market distribution. Even without mass market distribution, it was the only independently full color comic book out there. The only other thing out there were some fanzines, and and those are very, very, regional. You know what I mean? To very small runs and black and white and etc. Uh, Nonetheless, done by very capable people, but it was just the way it was. So yeah, I had lots of challenges. I borrowed money I borrowed $8,000 to get started, and in out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. And yeah, it was an uphill battle, pretty well all the time, and ran out of money in 76. Moved to Carson, Alberta, where my wife and I were married. We are Latter-day Saints, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and there is a Latter-day Saint temple in Cardston. At that time, the only one in Canada. There's now 11 or 12 across Canada. Anyway, so we ran a small weekly newspaper there. George and Claude Saint-Aubin came with us. And after 5 months there, we enjoyed the experience. We learned some things, but we couldn't make enough income from that newspaper to support all of us. We were hoping that it would, and that I failed to find investors to get the comic book publishing again. Moved up to Calgary. I did find some investors, and we started CKR Productions in the beginning of 79. And we over the next, let me see, 18 months or so, we published up to number 14. 15 was actually finished, but I didn't get around to publishing it until 2005. And that was published as a very small run, um, kind of collector's edition, in black and white only, no color, even though
Okay.
the color was complete back
Okay.
then.
Okay. And so that's yeah, so that's definitely my area of interest. We will touch on the subsequent Canuck series because there's been some more series after that.
Oh
But
yeah,
first,
lots.
I want to like really drill down on this period of Captain Canuck because it's like an artifact of Canadian history, and it's like the womb of Captain Canucks where it all started, right?
Yeah.
Um, like in reading through the letters pages and the editorials of the original series, I noticed that very early on, a going concern was breaking into the American distribution market. So, what was the barrier? What was and how did you manage to eventually break into the American market, and how did that influence the creation of the series?
Well, the American market was very important, and we did get distribution into the United States right from the beginning, right from issue number one.
Oh, you
It was
did?
kind of they did it as testing the waters, more or less. It was only distributed in border states like New York, Michigan, um, Ohio, etc.
Maine?
And it did well enough that eventually, with another distribution company, we had by issue number nine, I believe, we had distribution throughout the United States. So it was everywhere in the US. Another means of distribution also began even before issue number nine was I so the print runs were quite large. There were 200,000 copies per print per issue. And what some of the regional distributors were doing, and very, I to this day I feel gratitude towards them. They returned the copies to me that they didn't sell whole, so that I could resell them. Even and most of them were in excellent condition. You know what I mean? And a lot of those ended up being sold to jobbers who would then bag them with other comics, Marvel, DC, whatever, and sell them in discount stores like Woolco back then and many others. And many people that I've talked to over the years said, "Oh yeah, I bought my first Captain Canuck in a 99-cent bag at Woolco." And in Florida, for example, you know what I mean? And so that was another. And the other, then in 1975, Phil Seuling was starting to a very, that was the very, very beginning of the direct market. So there was, you know, I don't know how many stores there were in the States. There might have been 10 in total in the United States. I don't know the number, but, and he started supplying those stores with comics, and he would buy them from the mass market distributors. He would go to them and just buy them and then make a margin, a small margin when he resold them to these fledgling, direct market stores, comic book shops. So, a few thousand got into the States. I think I sold 5,000 to Phil. Um, I can't remember when. Anyways, just as a small bite out of a 200,000 print run, mind you. So, but, fortunately, I managed to make use, thanks to those distributors returning copies, of most of the copies that were printed, a good majority, because, there's a lot of waste in that system. Even today, it's the same system. You go into a convenience store or any store that sells magazines, those are all there on a consignment basis. The copies that don't sell go back to the distributor and they're shredded. And most, I don't know if there's any publishers that make money from their newsstand sales. They do it as a means of promotion for the magazine, just to keep it in the public eye, and to gain subscribers. You buy the magazine and there's always an ad in there. You can subscribe and get it a lot cheaper than buying it on the newsstand. And if you really want this magazine, that's the best way to go, kind of thing. So And that's just the way the system is. And there's no more, the comics are not being distributed after, it's probably been, oh my goodness, 10 years or 20 years. That'd be the last time comics were distributed on newsstands because it just, you lose money. It's only a means of promotion now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not worth that anymore, I don't think so.
Right.
Now, and the mass market distributors are all, it's the system is all, they know that they're just distributing the magazines as a promotional product, and so they've increased their cut, so to speak. You know what I mean? Because of that.
Yeah. So I think they call that loss leader or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Um, okay. A few questions on the creative side. Um, so so this is issue one, and right from the get-go, not only are you distinguishing yourself from like the independent competition by being in full color, but I notice like a technique of photo collage. Like so you're adding photographs as backgrounds and so forth, which I thought was like super creative. So was this, I know you have a background as a graphic designer, which I do too. Um, I'm thinking maybe that comes from that knowledge of graphic design, or just tell us about how your decision of putting the book together in this manner.
Well, so when I first looked at publishing, I'm looking at all the Marvel and DC and all those comics out there, and the coloring method that was used back then, they used what they called photo mats, and it was basically, it had a very limited palette, and it was all flat color.
Right.
The screen, it was a very coarse screen. It was like 85 dots per inch, where most printing was at least 135 dots per inch. So, and even who's that artist who did some famous paintings that replicated that look of comic books and even used
Uh,
the dots?
Liechtenstein.
Yeah, Liechtenstein. Thank you. I knew it was a Stein. Anyways, so I wanted a better system. I remember talking to the company that actually did the coloring for all the comic books for Marvel and DC, and he told me about it. And very nice guy, and told me, and the rates were pretty low. A lot of the people that were preparing these flats were housewives, and they did it as a part-time gig from home kind of thing. And so. I went to the company that did color separations, and back then it was all done with these large stat cameras and filters. That's how color separations were done. Now, all printing, it uses those four process colors: black, magenta, yellow, and cyan blue. Everything out there to this day is made up of those four process colors. And from there, you get thousands and thousands of other colors and gradations. And so with the thanks of what was his name? Was it Dick Thomas? Anyways, I started experimenting with different things with his help. And we came up with I tried a couple of different things, and even some of those um, attempts are replicated or represented, I should say, in issue number one. What worked the best was we did our art the way other comic book artists did their art. I did it oversized, roughly, 10 by 15, and and I would, pencil, ink, and then I would put a sheet of acetate over top of that, clear acetate, and I had to do some experimenting before I found the right paint. But what I ended up using was the same paint that animators used back then
Okay.
because they painted cells. And so that worked. I used different things, tried different things. Letraset was big back then, and you could buy sheets of color, you know what I mean, and peel and stick and all of that stuff. So, and that worked the best. That gave us a limitless palette we could do gradated tones, and we didn't have to put up with just flat colors, etc. So, and other publishers ended up using that. And in fact, George and I ended up doing coloring for other publishers using that method. Of course, it's now all done with computers,
Right.
Photoshop, etc. That's how it's all done now today. Anyway, so that's how we did the color, and of course, it gave me the opportunity to put photos in there. I just had to cut and paste, to put the photos to get them into place. And part of the motivation of that too was it just saved me a little bit of time and effort. Instead of, spending time to draw that background, I'll just find a photograph and paste it in there. And
Right.
so there you go.
Yeah, because you're not only drawing, inking, coloring, writing, you're also you're heavily involved on the publishing side. So you must have been working long hours.
Yeah, I mean, I was a one-man band. I had a fellow, Dave Abbott, um, came to work for me for about 6 months, and his role mostly was to try and sell advertising space
Right.
and look for, things like licensing deals and stuff like that. And he was a really good salesman, but it just didn't work out. You know what I mean? I couldn't afford to keep him, and we weren't, we had a lot of media attention. We had a lot of public support for the comic back then. It was amazing. The media, news media coverage and interest was great. And I did do some licensing. The first license was with Tam O'Shanter, and that was for T-shirts and pajamas, and it was good. And we had a few smaller licenses, but licensing is extremely important in that business. Marvel and DC make more money from licensing and film than they ever do from their comic book sales.
Right. Take us back to like that media attention, like how intense was it? I know that a lot of people wrote in letters in those early issues saying they went and got the comic because they heard about it on TV.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, this is long before the internet, of course. And so, there was a limited number of media outlets, news media outlets. And so, I mean, I was new at this. I can remember I learned that, hey, I've got to send out a press release. I learned that. And in fact, I talked to a PR company in Winnipeg, and and the fellow was kind enough just to tell me what I should needed to do. And it was basically simply to prepare a decent uh, press release and get it into the right hands. And so I did that. I got great coverage. It was the first item on the national news. It was front page of a lot of newspapers all over the country. I'm a newbie at this, so I don't know what to expect when I do this. You know what I mean? And I was surprised how much interest it got. I think my timing was right. It's not that I was somehow had some inside, information on what the timing should be for the release of the first issue. I didn't have that, obviously, but I think, my timing was good. I think there was a growing sense of Canadianness in in the country. People were starting to feel, like we were part of a country and we weren't part of the United States, and we weren't just like the United States, and we were different, and we were our own country. And one kid put it the words he put it in were. Shortly after Montreal got the baseball team, um, this kid said, "We've got our own baseball team, and now we've got our own superhero. Now it feels like we've got a real country." So those were the ingredients, as far as he was concerned, that made a real country. It wasn't just flag and anthem and and name. That you had, there was other ingredients that needed to be in the mix. Oh.
Yeah. Um, I have to ask, I think it's an issue two. You might know about this, might or three. There was a little uh editorial that you added in. I can't remember exactly the issue of I guess a guy in Winnipeg who had decked out his car in all Captain Canuck decals or something. Some super fan, you don't remember that? Uh
No, go ahead. Tell me more.
I'll try to find it. There was a guy that you wrote about, and there was a little drawing of a guy. Yeah, here he is, who decked out his pacer.
No, no, no. That was my pacer.
Oh, it was yours. Okay, I
Yes.
misunderstood. Okay,
So what happened was, I thought in Winnipeg, I had a lot of media attention. It was constant, almost. You know what I mean?
because you
And
were local.
yeah, because I was a local. And I thought to myself, boy, it'd be great to have a car, and a futuristic looking car. And the Pacer was the one that I had my eye on. It looked futuristic back in 1975. And I actually tried other car dealers. Basically, I wanted to work a deal out where I would get the car, use of the car for free in exchange for promotional value. And so on the car, on the side, it said Captain Canuck, courtesy Motors, and
Oh,
that
okay,
happened to be the name of it. And they were the only AMC dealer in Winnipeg. And in fact, it was one of the other dealers that contact them. They've got the Pacer. That's probably the car you want, and it was. You know what I mean? It really was. So I contacted them, and we did make a deal. So. I got use of the car, basically a 1 year free lease, free use of that car. And I put that signage on both sides. So the car was in at least three or four different parades. So that was a way to promote, the dealership. They got I gave them comics to give away in their showroom. We had a guy dressed up as Captain Canuck show up for some of their events, etc. That kind of thing. And
okay.
so that's how I got used to the Pacer.
You got
And that's yeah.
that was the Canuck mobile.
Yeah.
Issue two, this is a bit of a miscellaneous thing. You may or may not be able to confirm this, but there is a letter from a young man from Fairview, Alberta, that sent in by the name of Jordan Peterson. Is this the Jordan Peterson, famous psychological commentator, controversial figure from Canada, who is also from Fairview, Alberta? Do you know?
I don't know, but now I'm going to look. That it's very, very possible. Very, very possible. I really don't know. There's been a few people whose letters have been appeared in the comic that, were later, I had contact with many, many years later, and they, people, the people who tended to write letters, Mark, um, oh, for heaven's sake, Mark, ah. I'm having a senior moment here. Can't remember his last name, but I mean, he turned out to be a great writer. Um, oh, for heaven's sakes. Anyways, I had a few people who wrote to me, and many years later, accomplished were accomplished either in politics or in writing or in art or in illustration. Different people who ended up working in the profession, who originally had written to me, etc. So yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to look into that.
To me, I mean, the likelihood that it is Dr. Jordan B. Peterson is very high. Fairview, Alberta is not a big town.
I
How
know,
many Jordan Petersons can there be in that
I know.
town?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, okay, let me just look through my list of questions, what I'd like to ask you next. Um, what was the decision between, in placing Captain Canuck in 1994 in the close future? Tell me about why that decision was made.
Well, I'm writing it actually, I started working on the story probably in December of 74. And 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 so I wanted latitude. I felt that if I put the stories in the future, that would give me a little more latitude. I wanted to make Canada more prominent in the world. Um, and so I thought, well, in well, it was, 93, 94. It actually begins in 93, seemed way off in the future back in 1975. Okay, it's almost 20 years in the future, and just whoa, I don't get too crazy here. So, and I decided that I needed to have it in the future so that it would give me latitude, so that I could project things that I wanted to project, like a more powerful Canada and a country that was more in view of other powers in the world, and the big powers, Russia and other countries. So that was the main reason I said it. And I wanted to have vehicles that looked kind of futuristic and that gave us the opportunity to do that. And devices that were futuristic too.
Mhm.
Communication devices that were futuristic, which are now like I don't even think I had flip phones back then. That was way beyond, the imagination, so to speak. And so,
Right.
anyways, yeah,
It gave you a little bit more creative room
yeah,
to do
yeah,
things. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Um, just a few more here. Um, I one thing that struck us as we were looking through this series, right off the bat, the series is quite pro-capitalist and suspicious of communism, which you don't see a lot in mainstream comic books now. And we found that very refreshing. And I looked through this series with one of my American co-hosts, and he found it so inspiring that it was pro Canada, pro capitalism, and it was like positive sentiment toward the country, which we find there's maybe a bit of a need for that now. Maybe it's not as prominent in our current
yeah,
media landscape. So just
yeah.
talk to us about that.
Well, remember, 1975 is we're still in the Cold War,
Right.
for one thing. And there was, I guess, a more striking difference in the minds of people who lived in Canada, United States, of the difference between, for example, Russia and, the Free West. So, yeah, I've always been a conservative. I've always been conservative minded. So, there you go. Um, I, um, I was definitely, you know, I mean, I had relatives. I had three uncles die in World War II. I was born in England, and they were all in the British Armed Forces. But so, I had some definite leanings, you might say, and feelings about, how I figured the world stood at that time, and that there was a more definition between the left and the right back then too, I think.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, so eventually the series becomes a little bit more fantastical and a little bit less dealing with those issues, but we definitely thought it was a good decision.
yeah,
One last thing about the original series, and then we'll discuss like the subsequent series, and then I'm not going to take too much of your time. I just want to find. So you manage in the summer special.
yeah,
I don't know if it was you or somebody at Captain Canuck managed to get some pinups from Mr. Dave Sim, who is
yep,
another legendary
yeah,
independent creator.
yeah,
And also, there's a pinup from Gene Day. These are
yeah,
all legendary names, right? And there's a
yeah.
few other really beautiful pinups. So tell us about collaborating with these guys.
And don't forget Tom Grummett.
Yes. I mean,
That's
these
his
are
very
beautiful.
Yeah, that's his that's his first um, comic book artwork.
This one here.
Yeah, Tom Grummett.
It's
Yeah, that's his very first
gorgeous.
comic book artwork, and he went on to do Superman and Superboy and a whole bunch of other stuff. Yeah, yeah, Tom. In fact, okay, can you see this?
Yes.
That's the latest cover from Tom Grummett. This
Oh,
was the
cool.
this is the summer special of 2025.
Okay.
So, anyways, yeah, Tom, I see Tom usually a couple of times a year if I go to cons, you know what I mean? When I go to cons, and I'm sure I'll see him in Calgary because I do plan to go to the Calgary Comic Con, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be in Vancouver, and I'm planning to be, one of the guests at in Vancouver Fan Expo as well. So, yeah, yeah, my goodness. He's done so much after that. That was sort of the beginning, the very, very beginning of his career as a comic book artist.
Yeah. Well, you can see straight away he's brilliant. Like you can see
Yeah,
why he would become a comic
yeah.
artist, right? Yeah.
Well, it's something I mentioned to Tom not too long ago, that pose, that running pose, I really liked it. So I used it. But as I told Tom, I had to add at least 40 pounds to my captain because his were so skinny.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah, so that whole original series really an inspiration to us as comics makers. We were so impressed because we were just thinking about all of the people that you have to connect in order to get this done. Like as independent comics creators, it's quite a solo adventure, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, so really do appreciate, that gave us like some creative energy, right? Looking through
yeah,
those.
yeah.
Um, so there are some more. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention is that in researching this, um, this was in the 1930s, 40s, the Canadian comics market was actually quite healthy and made artificially healthy. It was kind of boosted through the War Conservation Act, which
Yep.
there were restrictions on American products going to Canada. But you did all this without any sort of, political boost that way,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that it's really a feat like this.
Yeah. Well, let me clarify that. So what happened during World War II, American comic books were considered non-essential items, and so they were
Exactly.
not allowed into Canada. That opened the doors for Canadian
Yeah.
publishers to
Yeah.
publish Canadian comics. And then shortly after World War II was over, those Canadian comic books faded away because then
Yeah.
the country was flooded again with American comic books.
Yeah.
And so, and
But
that
for,
it's just, and that's been so I think, that when I came out with Captain Canuck, I think Canadians kind of maybe thought to themselves, hey, maybe some of them anyway thought, let's support our own this
yeah.
time. And I think that that's reverberated through the whole cultural scene of Canada to a
Yeah.
certain degree, anyways.
Well, the fact that yeah, Captain Canuck and that initial series had the impact it did, and it lasted as long as it did, uh, competing straight ahead with the American Giants is
Yeah,
is a feat in itself,
yeah,
in my estimation. So after that original series, there was some period of rest.
yep.
And then some more series that came out. So that's through licensing deal, or how were you involved in
Yeah,
those?
okay. So after number 14 came out, I mean, I'm kind of trying to condense all this history as much as I can here because I had, it did not work out very well with CKR, the two main owners and investors, and I didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things, and eventually, it basically just collapsed. And I went on to do other things. I have 8 children, and I need to keep bringing home income. You know what I mean? So I just went back to working as a commercial artist, I did two issues of Star Rider and the Peace Machine, which a whole other story behind that. I just basically did children's books, greeting cards, advertising, editorial art. I did all of that. And then in '85 we moved to Ontario, and I saw the market was looked very healthy, the direct market by early '90s, like '91, '92. And so that's when I thought would that in I guess motivated me to try again. And that's when I came out. I found some investors, and we got a little bit of like a government loan kind of thing, and I put up four issues under the Captain Canuck Reborn series. And I did a newspaper strip for almost 2 years as well. It was only run in 11 newspapers, so it just wasn't economically viable enough to keep going. And then in 2004, I licensed Captain Canuck to two brothers out of Manitoba who did a four-part series, and it did well. It was well written, um, and Langlois brothers, and Riel and his brother. So that, and then I did it again. The next time I did Captain It was 2006, which was Legacy, and I did eventually did two issues of Legacy, and then in around 2010. 2000, yeah, around 2010, I started seriously talking to Fatty Hakim, who eventually formed Chapter House, which became Lev Gleason. And then in 2013, I licensed the rights to Chapter House, and we started publishing again. The first issue published through them was the 2014 Summer Special. And then in 2015, the new series, written by Kalman Androsovsky, and he did a great job. He did some of the art, and then um, uh, Leonard Kirk, who had done some work on the Reborn series, came in and did a bunch uh, of work on this newer series. So that's and then I've continued. I've been with Lev Gleason. Eventually sold the rights to Lev Gleason, and that happened a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. It was over a period of about 3 or 4 years that the transaction took place. And I continue to work with Fatty Hakim and his company, and I wish I would have had Fatty, would have met Fatty decades before then. You know what I mean? Because he had the right, he's got the business head for it, and he's got the creative mind for it as well, and which I didn't have before. So that's roughly the history of it, and of course there's things coming up in the future. There's going to be a documentary. There's going, there is the animated web series. I don't know if you've seen that. That's a lot of fun. The 5 episode Captain Canuck web series is still on YouTube and on other sites, I think. So and an animation which has been I've optioned the rights to Captain Canuck numerous times in the past, for either animation or film. And option agreements usually only last about a year, year and a half, and that gives the production company time to pull things together, you know, creative group and financing, funding sources, etc. And but it's never, even though I made a little bit of money from the option agreements themselves, the goal was to get actually something produced,
Right.
and that hasn't happened yet. But we're getting much, much closer to an animated series for television, and eventually a film, a feature film, a live action feature film. We're totally confident that eventually those will happen. We
Mm.
feel that
Uh-huh.
we've reached a plateau where we're now in at that level. of some what's the word of notoriety for the character that we're in that ballpark, so to speak, and it's just a matter of getting the right players involved. So, but we've had a lot of big players approach us in the past, big players wanting to do, and in some cases, Fatty just had to turn down the deal because it was just not in our interest at all. But in other cases, they just couldn't pull it together.
Mhm.
So, and that's just the business way it is. It's just endless. You know what I mean? I've been at this for a little over 50 years now. Now, you got to understand that. I started Captain Canuck a little over 50 years ago, but and but I only worked on it for a couple of years, and then I worked on it again for about a year and a half, and then I worked on it again for another year and a half, and there was big gaps in between. There was like 10 years between before I did Reborn, and during that time, I was making a living. I had to. And like I said, I did greeting cards. I started out right out of high school as a crest designer. This is long before computers, of course. And I did fashion styling for a while, mostly for women's outerwear. And I sold styling designs to garment industry um, as well. And then I worked as a graphic designer, and it's all paste up back then. There's no computer, all paste up and lecture set and hand drawn and all of that stuff. Um, and one of the other things I did back then, I worked as a portrait artist for a while, and that's how I met my wife in Eaton's department store in 1973 in downtown Winnipeg. So this was in November, December. They turned the eighth floor into Christmas land. That store is gone. That that store, which was the more retail was done out of that store than any other store in all of the entire province of Manitoba. That
Hmm.
eight-story Eaton's department store in downtown Winnipeg. So there's a book about it. So um, a store like no other, I think it's called. My wife has read it, but anyhow, so yeah, I know it's been 50 years, but I haven't, it's not like it's always been on my mind, so to speak. But, um, I wasn't always actively working on it. And when I was busy.
Right. Right. Well, we do appreciate your time and coming on our Comics Odyssey show. There's very cool to get more details about this. Great talking to you. Just one last question. What would you say is your fondest memory relating to Captain Canuck? Your favorite issue or a letter or some kid or whatever? What would you say is your fondest memory?
Well, definitely right at the top of the list is working with George Freeman and Claude Saint-Aubin. So George came to my office after just finishing that issue number two, and George walked in and showed me his work. And oh my goodness, I was so impressed with his work, and he's well respected, and many people still like George Freeman's artwork. He does mostly storyboarding now for film. He lives in Winnipeg, and of course I stay in touch with both George and Claude Saint-Aubin. Uh, Claude came along, literally showed up at my doorstep in Winnipeg early November of 75. And he just basically said he spoke very little English. And he said, I come to help you with the comic. So, and so, we just, oh, okay, come on, and right away he just became part of the team. And we worked as a threesome for, uh, very much so. And Claude said to me, he said, those are some of the most cherished years of my life is working together with you and George, you know what I mean? And he said that's where he learned most of his English, is working with us. And I learned a little bit of French, having him on board, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
and I stay in touch with him to this day. You know, what I mean, Claude is in Raymond, Alberta, and and George is back in Winnipeg. Claude joined the church in Carson after we moved there. He became a member of the church there, and so Claude and I have that in common, but we both of us always looked up to George for his expertise because we felt he was a superior artist, and he's very knowledgeable about a lot of things. You know what I mean? I think he'd do well on a show like Jeopardy. So and anyway, so that's definitely right at the top of the list of the things I remember the most.
Cool. The friends you made along the way.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
many others after that too. And yeah.
that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much. We're going to cut it here. Just stay on the line for about 90 seconds just so we can do some admin stuff. But
Yep.
yeah, thank you once again for your time and for agreeing to have a conversation with me.
You're very welcome.